One of the biggest names in video games undoubtedly is Nintendo. It's a company responsible for what are often credited as some of the greatest games of all time, and yet for every wacky game idea that Nintendo gives the green light to, there are many more they turn down and usually never end up getting made. In this video, we'll be examining a hand-picked selection of those obscure game pitches that were rejected by the Big N, including some that have never previously been reported on. The Art Academy series began late in the DS's lifecycle in a collaboration between Headstrong Games and Nintendo. Having numerous entries across Nintendo's various systems since 2009, the series became increasingly associated with some of their biggest first-party brands. In 2014, a Pokémon version of Art Academy was released on the 3DS. They also held a number of Nintendo-themed competitions via the Wii U's Art Academy Sketchpad, in which players had to draw pictures related to different properties, including Yoshi, Zelda, and Animal Crossing. At the rate they were going, it only seemed natural for Nintendo and Art Academy to continue growing closely intertwined. Headstrong Games appears to have thought so at least, as they pitched to Nintendo a game specifically built around Nintendo's characters and Art Academy coming together. The working title for the potential game was Nintendo All-Stars Art Academy. It's said to have been pitched towards the end of work on Disney Art Academy, which released in 2016. Its premise was very similar to previous entries in the series like that one, with a few twists. According to a former employee, the team wanted to include facilities for making sprite art, and lessons for drawing iconic sprites from games like Super Mario Bros. And The Legend of Zelda. Another feature they were hoping to include was a music studio that paid homage to Nintendo's own Mario Paint for the SNES. Very similar to the music composer suite from that game, players were supposed to be able to create their own musical compositions in a simple Mario-themed interface. The pitch was for a 3DS game consisting of early design documents and concept art. No prototype was ever developed. A source linked with Headstrong Games alleges that when it was presented to Nintendo, they weren't interested in pursuing more Art Academy games at the time and turned it down. While this first attempt at selling them on the concept was not successful, there's always a chance that Nintendo could one day revisit it further down the line. Kujo Entertainment, the parent company of Headstrong, is said to still have a good relationship with them. Though certainly not without historical precedent, seeing Nintendo allow their characters to appear on non-Nintendo platforms is rare. Next on our list is an example of one such situation, where we could have seen one of their most acclaimed games of all time come to home computers. A small company named IDF pitched doing a port of Super Mario Bros. 3 to PC. It was worked on in September 1990, just less than 2 years on from the game's original release on the NES. The idea came about when programmer John Carmack developed code enabling fast side-scrolling graphics on PC. Combining Dangerous Dave, a character invented by his friend designer John Romero, with a recreation of the opening from Super Mario Bros. 3, he came up with a demonstration. This would become known as Dangerous Dave in copyright infringement. Romero was so enthusiastic about the game that the two agreed to team up and formally pitch an official port of Super Mario Bros. 3 to PC, using IDF as their company title. A prototype for the port was put together over the course of just 1 week by Romero and Carmack, who worked day and night on a budget of nothing. They even had to borrow computers to develop it on from the offices of Softdisk, the magazine where they were both working at the time. The playable demo was sent to Nintendo's offices in Kyoto via Nintendo of America, who reviewed it carefully. Ultimately, they decided against making a full game purely on the grounds that they were against developing games for systems they hadn't made themselves. One consolation for the developers, however, was that Nintendo's higher-ups are said to have been very impressed by it. IFD might not have been able to score a contract with Nintendo, but success still came their way. The company soon changed its name to id Software, who would go on to make such games as Wolfenstein and Doom. Nintendo Software Technology was once one of Nintendo's most important Western studios. Responsible for games like Wave Race Blue Storm and Metroid Prime Hunters, they were a valued asset to Nintendo, helping to bolster their first-party lineups. In 2009, the company's developers began wanting to make games for Nintendo's WiiWare platform, and mapped out several proposals. Nintendo themselves had brought some occasional first-party support to WiiWare, such as a Dr. Mario game and Pokémon Rumble. Nintendo Nintendo Software Technology, however, wanted to bring quite a bit more to the table, offering to develop a number of fully original games to be published by Nintendo. These would have been smaller new IPs for players of all ages. One of these pitches was for a quiz game about planet Earth, where players would have answered questions themed around different geographical locations. Another was a game about managing and organising a stage show. A former developer told me that these pitches were supposed to incorporate Mii characters too. Very little ever became of NST's time spent formulating WiiWare pitches. Due to Nintendo's disinterest, they only ever reached the form of early documentation. This is mostly believed to have been down to the cancellation of their previous game, best known as Project Hammer, which ended up being one of Nintendo's largest ever internal failures. Its development ran for over 5 years until 2009, during which time millions upon millions of dollars had been poured into it. Consequently, Nintendo would allow them less creative freedom in the future, and became hesitant to greenlight anything original they proposed. In the years since Project Hammer, Nintendo Software Technology has pitched many different projects only to have them turned down. Their WiiWare games make up only a small number of these. In the 2010s, many more staff have since left the company, with some citing the limited creative scope Nintendo allowed them. Q Games is a studio based in Kyoto, Japan that has enjoyed a close relationship with Nintendo over the years, collaborating on the Star Fox series. The company was founded by Dylan Cuthbert, who worked on the original Star Fox SNES game, as well as its follow-up Star Fox 2. On the 3DS, they teamed up with Nintendo once more for Star Fox 64 3D, a remake of the classic N64 game. Q Games and Nintendo EAD co-developed it before it was released in 2011. According to Dylan Cuthbert, this isn't the only remake we could have seen from them on the 3DS. Shortly after production on Star Fox 64 3D wrapped, Q Games approached Nintendo once more and proposed remaking the original Star Fox. A playable prototype was made for the pitch, which is said to have boasted an enhanced frame rate and blocky retro 3D graphics to emulate the look of the original. Despite their enthusiasm about Star Fox 64 3D, Nintendo was not interested in moving forward with it. Speaking to Cuthbert in 2017, he shared that he wasn't sure why Nintendo's higher-ups weren't interested in their pitch, but stated that Shigeru Miyamoto, who spearheaded the remake of 64, was absent during the demonstration, which could help to explain why. When I inquired if the 3DS demo could be shown to the world now, some years later, Cuthbert told me that it was probably gone forever. Next up is something a bit different, a rejected Nintendo pitch that still happened by other means. Plok is a 1993 platformer game that was developed by Software Creations for the Super Nintendo. The game revolved around the titular hero Plok, who could hurl his limbs at enemies to attack them. Plok was the company's first ever original IP to be wholly self-financed. However, it was very nearly a game that was published and co-developed by Nintendo themselves instead. Midway through development, Software Creations co-founder Richard Kay sent a demo of Plok to Nintendo. He had been searching for a publishing partner to distribute the game and saw Nintendo as a prime candidate. According to Kay, it was none other than Mario creator himself, Shigeru Miyamoto, who took a liking to Plok and believed it had potential. He is even said to have scribbled down a list on a piece of paper plotting out what he thought were the top 3 platformers around at the time. The number 1 spot belonged to Mario, Sega's Sonic the Hedgehog came in at 2, and Plok was in 3rd, despite having only been in development for a relatively short period of time. He then declared that, under his personal guidance, Plok could surpass Sonic in his estimation, although he didn't think it could dethrone Mario. Had a deal gone forward, Plok could have gone on to become one of Nintendo's next big characters. Miyamoto apparently saw them not only potentially publishing it, but sharing development duties with them in some capacity too. In the end, nothing ever came of these discussions. Nintendo for some reason lost interest in working with them on Plok. In an interview with Retro Gamer, Richard Kay speculated that it might have been in part down to Nintendo working on Yoshi's Island around this time. He believes that the game shared similar features and visual elements, which could have possibly contributed to Nintendo backing away from Plok. They were still able to find another publisher, Trade West, and the game, though not hugely successful, earned itself a modest cult following. E3 2006 saw the reintroduction of Pit, the main protagonist of Kid Icarus, who appeared in a trailer for the next Super Smash Bros. Game, Brawl. As a result of this, fan demand for a new Kid Icarus game surged. It had been over 15 years since the last one, of Myths and Monsters for the Game Boy. It would be a few more years before Nintendo would finally answer calls for the series to return, but ever since that first trailer dropped, they had been quietly reviewing options to make it happen. Over the years, former employees from various Nintendo studios have claimed that several different pitches existed for a Kid Icarus Revival around this time. One of these came from one of Nintendo's biggest first-party subsidiaries, Retro Studios. In the early 2000s, they had been responsible for the Metroid Prime games, and now a few of their developers had turned their sights towards bringing back another series with Kid Icarus. According to former members of Retro, very few people seem to have been involved with the pitch, which was for a game on the Wii. It's said to have been presented sometime in mid-2007, meaning that it would have entered development later that year had it been accepted. At the time, the rest of the company was wrapping up on Metroid Prime 3 Corruption. The Kid Icarus pitch was headed by Jason Behr, a veteran game designer who worked on both Metroid Prime and its sequel, Echoes. Very little is said to have been done on the pitch, which apparently existed as nothing more than a few documents. Before anything more substantial like test animations or an early gameplay demo could be made, Nintendo dismissed the developing project outright. The reasoning behind this was how it went against Nintendo's key philosophies regarding game pitches. It was apparently presented to them mostly as the idea of reviving the IP and its characters, as opposed to offering a particularly unique or well-constructed core gameplay concept that would justify the game's existence. A closely held ideal of Nintendo's is their idea of putting gameplay first over all else. Narrative, visuals, characters, these are usually secondary to them. Retro's Kid Icarus concept failed to satisfy this criteria, and like many Nintendo pitches that have made this same mistake before it, it was swiftly shot down. By contrast, the Kid Icarus Revival that was eventually made, Uprising, only came about when its director Masahiro Sakurai invented a gameplay concept first, before realizing in retrospect that Kid Icarus would be a good fit for it. I reached out to Jason Behr in 2017 to see if he would be willing to give his thoughts on the Kid Icarus concept. He was not able to confirm or deny his involvement in the project, but shared that Kid Icarus had always been his favourite NES game growing up, and that its design continues to inspire him to this day. If you've enjoyed this video, please don't forget to subscribe and check out my other videos for more exclusive looks at lost video games. Unseen64 is an archive for cancelled, unreleased and unseen video games. You can visit the site at unseen64.net. I've been Liam, I hope you found this video to be of interest, and have fun.